Have you ever felt a single word cut deeper than 1,000 compliments could ever lift you? Have you noticed how a fleeting glance, a careless remark, or a small disappointment lodges itself in your mind, refusing to let go? Meanwhile, countless moments of ease, comfort, or joy pass almost unnoticed. Why do you feel unsettled even when everything seems to be going well, when your responsibilities are met, when the world appears stable, yet tension tightens quietly around your chest? Who is this you that reacts so strongly, that grows fragile under the weight of what others think, say, or do? Why does your mind insist on scripting stories around every experience, claiming ownership, establishing identity, and demanding permanence in a world that is always changing? The Buddha recognized this suffering not as a distant theory, but as the reality you live, breathe, and enact every day. He asked questions that cut directly to the heart of experience. From what does suffering arise? From craving? From clinging? From grasping at self and possessions? Suffering arises because the mind clings to a fragile construct called the ego, a self that seems essential, that must be defended, cherished, and preserved at all costs. This ego is not a fixed thing. It is a habit, a recurring pattern, a daily act of claiming I and mine. It turns ordinary interactions into battlegrounds, small disappointments into despair, and simple attachments into cages that bind attention, emotion, and thought. The subtlety of this force is what makes it so pervasive. It lives in the way you react to praise, how you interpret criticism, how you measure yourself against others, and how you cling to what feels like security. Life does not need a doctrine or a belief to shift its course. The Buddha pointed out that when the patterns of I, me, mine are clearly seen, freedom arises. A space opens where suffering no longer finds a home, and the mind moves through experience without the constant pull of self. What ego is and how it is formed. When you look at your day, the interactions you have, the thoughts that rise and fade, you may notice a quiet insistence that threads through everything, the sense that you, your experiences, your feelings, must be protected, cherished, maintained. It is soft, almost imperceptible at first, yet it shapes your reactions, colors your relationships, and determines what feels painful or rewarding. People often believe that this voice, the I, is a fixed self, a solid personality, a life story that belongs entirely to them. They attach to achievements, failures, opinions, and roles in the world, believing that all of this defines who they truly are. The Buddha taught that this sense of self is not permanent. It is a construct, a habit of mind, a recurring illusion that rises and falls with every thought, every sensation, every perception. Ego is not your skills, your intelligence, the way others admire or criticize you. It is not the positions you hold, the degrees you earn, or the accolades you receive. It is subtler, more insidious, the act of identifying itself. It is the habitual insistence, even silent, that something is yours, that you are defined by it, that it must be defended. The ego is the quiet voice that claims ownership over every sensation, every encounter, every fleeting thought, demanding permanence in a world that never stops changing. Each morning, you do not merely step into the world, you step into a version of yourself that insists it matters, that it must be maintained. Every glance, every remark, every memory strengthens this insistence, moment by moment. The Buddha described human experience through the 5 aggregates, or khandhas in Pali: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form is the body, the vessel through which you engage with the world, a constant source of attachment, because pain, aging, and fragility threaten it. Feeling encompasses pleasure, pain, and neutral sensations, the threads that color each moment as enjoyable, unpleasant, or ordinary. Perception is the mind's interpretation of events, the judgments, labels, and meanings assigned to what arises. Mental formations are the invisible currents of habit, intention, and impulse that shape responses. Consciousness is the awareness that observes all of these. On their own, each aggregate seems mundane, neutral, harmless. But the moment you identify with them, the ego is born. When a colleague fails to recognize your effort, the mind immediately claims, "I am wronged." When praise arrives, it becomes proof, "I am worthy." Each moment of this kind is ego in motion, a subtle, continuous habit that reinforces identity, strengthens selfhood, and colors every experience. People rarely notice it. They live under its influence as if it were inevitable, natural, unavoidable. Yet the Buddha called this habit as the root of clinging and craving. Ego is evident not only in great ambitions or intense conflicts, but in the quiet moments of daily life. When someone takes a parking spot you hoped for, when someone interrupts or criticizes, when recognition is withheld, the mind seizes the moment, claiming it, defending it, interpreting it as a threat or affirmation. Every act of identification, every thought, sensation, or memory is another stitch in the fabric of ego. Over time, these habitual identifications accumulate into a lens through which the world is experienced. Everything either affirms you or threatens you. People who achieve status, build reputations, or inherit wealth often discover the same pattern. Praise becomes intoxicating, criticism unbearable. Recognition feels essential, failure feels catastrophic. The ego, quietly persistent, turns accomplishments into obsession, setbacks into suffering, and relationships into battlegrounds where the self must be protected. Everyday moments, walking through a crowded street, waiting in line, observing others' actions, become arenas where the ego operates. Each I and mine strengthens the construct, embedding it further into the mind's architecture. The formation of ego is gradual, imperceptible, and reinforced by memory, social feedback, and comparison. A compliment is savored and internalized. A slight is defended vigorously. Over time, these habits crystallize into the lens through which all life is interpreted. Affirmation versus threat. Reward versus loss. Praise versus insult. This is the mechanism through which craving takes root and clinging arises. People are rarely aware of it, yet every thought, sensation, and interaction subtly strengthens the ego, making happiness fleeting and satisfaction fragile. Whether it is irritation at being overlooked, pride at recognition, envy at someone else's success, or grief at what is lost, the ego is at work. It is neither good nor bad. It is habitual, invisible, unquestioned. Every act of identification reinforces the self, and with it, the patterns of desire, aversion, and defense that make human life so often painful. The Buddha's teaching illuminates this truth. What you call I is not a fixed entity, but a habit of mind, arising again and again as people cling, defend, and insist upon identity. Understanding how ego forms is the first insight into why suffering is so pervasive and why it can appear in the most ordinary of moments. The hidden danger of ego. ego is subtle, almost imperceptible at first, yet its influence reaches into every corner of life. You may notice it in your daily interactions, in the thoughts that arise unbidden when someone challenges your opinion, or when recognition fails to meet the expectation you had set for yourself. It is the force that whispers, "I deserve more. I am owed respect. I must be right." For people across the world, this same force drives the patterns of conflict, competition, and unrest that are witnessed every day, from the disputes at a workplace to the clashes between nations. Everywhere, the ego demands permanence in a world that is endlessly shifting, insisting that what belongs to me must remain untouched, that identity must remain unchallenged, that pride must never waver. People may fight, accuse, and retaliate, yet the root is not merely circumstance. It is the insistence of the mind on claiming ownership, on establishing superiority, on protecting the fragile construct of identity. The Buddha described this as tanha, craving, the source of dukkha, suffering. When the ego clings to what it believes is essential, it ignites the fires of desire and fear, binding people in a relentless cycle of dissatisfaction. The mind labels the experience as a threat to self, and suddenly the ego flares into action. Comparison takes hold, defensiveness rises, conflict becomes inevitable. Across offices, families, and friendships, this pattern repeats endlessly. The need to defend I and mine shapes decisions, fuels arguments, and colors perceptions. The danger lies not only in overt disputes, but in the quiet erosion of empathy, in the way people measure themselves against others, in the subtle resentment that accumulates unnoticed until it erupts. Even in moments that appear serene, ego quietly exerts its authority. It counts accomplishments as proof of worth. It gauges admiration as evidence of significance, and it interprets criticism as an attack rather than a reflection of circumstance. The ordinary, everyday choices, the prioritization of status over connection, of recognition over understanding, are all guided by the same underlying impulse. Across generations, societies, and institutions, this constant drive manifests as greed, envy, and insecurity, creating suffering that reverberates far beyond individual minds. People may not see it, yet it shapes entire cultures, economies, and political landscapes. When you look within, the patterns are unmistakable. Ego demands that desires be satisfied, that avoidance of loss is paramount, that identity remains unscathed. It reacts to what it perceives as threat with fear or aggression, and it responds to what it perceives as opportunity with craving and grasping. This dual impulse, seeking what it wants, rejecting what it does not, is the engine that propels dissatisfaction through every aspect of life. Relationships fracture, ambitions falter, and personal peace slips through the hands of those who remain unaware of the subtle force at play. The Buddha observed this truth clearly. Suffering is not only caused by the world itself, but by the clinging to the self, the attachment to identity, the constant grasping at I and mine. The consequences of ego are timeless. They are visible not only in the global stage, where disputes escalate into conflict, but in the quiet corridors of the mind, where pride, envy, and fear shape perception. Even when people believe they are acting rationally, ego quietly shapes priorities, influences moral judgments, and drives behavior towards self-interest. Its power lies in its subtlety. It does not announce itself, yet it quietly dictates the rhythm of thoughts and actions. Every disagreement, every rivalry, every unrest, whether large or small, can be traced back to this fundamental insistence on preserving the self, on asserting identity, on clinging to what is seen as mine. You can see it in the accumulation of possessions, in the jealousy that sparks between siblings, in the quiet resentment that forms when recognition is withheld. You may notice it in yourself when a single remark pierces deeper than the reason allows, when comparisons stir unease, when fear of loss eclipses present contentment. These are not isolated moments. They are reflections of a universal truth. The ego, subtle though it may appear, shapes the patterns of thought and action for every human being. It is an unseen architect of conflict, a silent force that guarantees suffering whenever attachment to self arises. This is why the Buddha spoke of ego as the root from which suffering grows. The craving for permanence, the fear of loss, the insistence on recognition. These impulses are inseparable from the self as it is commonly understood. People fight wars, harbor resentment, and pursue endless achievement, not merely out of circumstance, but because the ego demands continuity, validation, and security. Wherever identity is clung to, wherever the mind asserts, "This is mine, this is me," suffering follows. You can witness it across history, across communities, across your own life. The danger is not hypothetical. It is immediate, pervasive, and invisible, shaping behavior in ways that are both subtle and profound. The insight is clear and unwavering. As long as the ego exists, suffering is inevitable. Craving fuels desire, fear, and resistance, and every attachment to self multiplies the tensions of existence. People may seek power, recognition, or comfort, believing that these will secure peace. Yet the ego transforms every gain into a potential loss, every pleasure into a moment of anxiety. Even the most mundane interactions, a comment misinterpreted, a glance unnoticed, a promotion gained or denied, are charged with the energy of ego. The Buddha observed this in the ordinary life of people and in the patterns of human society, and he revealed it as a universal law. Wherever clinging to self arises, suffering will follow. Ego is not simply a personal inconvenience, it is a force that shapes everything from private thoughts to global conflicts. It is subtle, yet immense, invisible, yet omnipresent, quiet, yet unrelenting. For every person who clings to identity, it dictates the rhythm of thought and action. For every society that values possession and status over insight and compassion, it shapes the structures of power and the patterns of unrest. It is the quiet engine behind dissatisfaction, the hidden source of tension, the ever-present companion of fear and desire. This is the danger of ego. It is not always visible, yet it governs life itself. Wherever attachment to self persists, suffering persists alongside it. Ending ego without self-destruction. The Buddha's teaching does not ask you to destroy yourself, nor to deny the life that flows through every moment. There is no command to vanish, no injunction to erase the awareness of I entirely. Yet the ego, as you may now recognize, holds tremendous sway over your thoughts, choices, and relationships. Ending its dominion does not require force, denial, or self-punishment. It requires a quiet kind of insight, a steady, clear attention that illuminates each thought, desire, and reaction, revealing how it arises, holds, and fades. You notice it in daily life. A conversation turns tense, and the mind insists on being right. Praise arrives, and a subtle expectation of reward lingers. A slight, a criticism, a setback, and a quiet defense tightens the heart and mind. In each case, the ego demands attention, insisting on permanence where none exists. These patterns do not need to be eradicated through force. They dissolve naturally when clearly recognized, when attention rests without judgment, preference, or impulse to defend or attack. In this recognition, the habit loosens, like a shadow pressed too long against a wall. Many assume that freeing themselves from ego requires rejecting ambition, erasing desire, or retreating from life entirely. Freedom does not come from denial. It comes from understanding. Ethical conduct, for example, weakens self-centered patterns. When your words and deeds align with honesty and respect, the ego's claims lose their energy. It is not a rule to follow, but a reflection of natural law. Acting without exploitation or harm gently softens the grip of clinging. You may notice it in moments of generosity, offered not for recognition, but simply because it is right. The relief, the subtle ease that follows, is not the reward of ego. It is the loosening of its hold. Mindfulness opens another doorway. When attention rests on your thoughts, feelings, and impulses, the patterns of ego become visible amidst life's turbulence. You feel the subtle tightening of mine, the quiet insistence of I must be defended, the habitual surge of fear or desire when the world shifts unexpectedly. Recognizing these patterns does not strengthen them. It shows them as fleeting, not absolute. Consider the headlines that shake nations, the speeches that ignite protests, or the sudden collapse of markets. The mind reacts instantly: outrage, fear, hope, defense. Yet beneath it all echoes the insistence of selfhood. The ego loosens, not because it is challenged, but because its solidity was always imagined, a construct pressed onto a ceaseless, flowing world. Insight deepens naturally with reflection. The self you call I appears as a sequence: sensations, memories, perceptions, intentions, awareness. No single element is permanent, and no combination produces a lasting I. The habitual insistence to claim, defend, or identify may arise repeatedly. Yet when attention rests steadily, the ego begins to appear as a pattern, a process, not a fixed reality. Each surge of desire, each tightening of mine, each impulse to assert identity shows both inevitability and impermanence. The more clearly these patterns are recognized, the more they loosen naturally, and the less they dictate the rhythm of life. Wisdom unfolds from there. It is not a set of instructions, but the gradual understanding of how thoughts, feelings, and identity interplay. The desire to prove yourself in conversation fades when the pattern of defense is recognized. Longing for recognition loses urgency when praise comes and goes, when opinions shift like clouds. In ordinary life, this insight transforms interactions. A meeting at work, a disagreement with a friend, the frustrations of traffic, the loss of an opportunity. In each moment, the ego's insistence can be seen and released naturally. Patterns of ego appear everywhere, in families, in friendships, in the swirling headlines of news and social narratives, the urge to defend identity, the craving for recognition, the fear of loss, the pursuit of status, all rise unbidden. When a story challenges your beliefs, questions your values, or criticizes the roles you hold, tension surges as if the attack were personal. Indignation, fear, even shame appear. The mind turns the story into you, defending what is held as permanent. The news itself does not create the storm. It is the echo of ego interpreting it as threat. Recognizing this, the patterns begin to loosen. The intensity fades, not through suppression, but through clarity, seeing the mechanism beneath the reaction. The mind does not need to force itself into non-attachment. Effort often reinforces the very habit it seeks to dissolve. Attempting to annihilate the ego from the standpoint of, I must remove myself, only strengthens it. True insight does not oppose. It allows clarity to shine on the patterns of clinging. Each surge of tension, each tightening around mine, becomes less compelling, less absolute, less demanding. The habit relaxes through steady recognition of how it forms, flows, and dissolves naturally. Even in quiet moments, the patterns appear. When someone interrupts your work, when criticism is directed at you, when plans fail, you may feel the familiar surge of self-importance. Desire and defense tighten. Pause. Recognize the insistence of I and mine. The pattern begins to relax. Intensity is not removed by suppression or rejection, but by attention itself. Insight replaces instinct. Clarity replaces reaction. Slowly, the ego's grip weakens. Whether in a bustling office, a family home, or a larger social context, the urge to defend identity produces tension, craving, and resistance. Seeing identity as a process reveals freedom. Everyday challenges become laboratories for awareness, where the quiet dissolution of ego can unfold again and again. Ultimately, the ego ends not by annihilation, not by rejection, but by recognition. When you notice the insistence of I in thought, the clutching at mine in desire, the subtle tension in defense, you see them as habits, not absolute truths. They arise, they hold, they fade. Seeing replaces believing. Suffering arises from craving, and freedom arises when clinging is recognized. You do not need to force the self to disappear. Simply notice the patterns that give it form. In that recognition, the ego dissolves naturally, leaving space for clarity, compassion, and freedom in every moment. Peace remains when ego ends. When ego loses its hold, what remains is not emptiness or a void, but a quiet clarity that can withstand the turbulence of the world. You may notice it in yourself when the news headlines ignite alarm, when opinions clash violently online, when communities fracture, or when the machinery of society moves with chaos and unpredictability. Life, in all its disorder, continues, yet a subtle freedom emerges in those who have loosened the grip of I and mine. Peace does not demand control, defense, or approval. It simply exists, steady and unmoved, even amidst confusion, conflict, and disappointment. People are often shocked by how fragile their calm can be. A tweet, a scandal, a failure, a criticism. These may erupt like a storm inside the mind because they strike the ego directly, questioning identity, competence, or morality. Yet when the ego no longer defines the ground of experience, suffering has no place to anchor. The insults and accolades, the praise and rejection, the sudden swings of fortune, they occur, but they no longer carry the weight of personal threat. What once demanded vigilance, correction, or defense now passes through, observed and unclaimed. Peace is present, not because the world has changed, but because the mind has loosened its insistence on permanence, ownership, and identity. Compassion arises naturally in the absence of ego, effortless and expansive. When the mind is no longer preoccupied with defending self-image or measuring worth against others, people's pain, confusion, and struggle can be witnessed without judgment. A neighbor enraged by politics, a colleague trapped in ambition, a friend consumed by jealousy, these no longer provoke a counterforce, but become opportunities to engage from clarity rather than habit. The absence of ego does not create passivity. It creates presence, a steadiness that allows action to arise not from fear, craving, or pride, but from insight into what is necessary and what is true. Freedom becomes evident in every decision and interaction. There is no need to chase recognition, to control outcomes, or to manipulate circumstances. Praise is not craved. Failure is not feared. Daily life continues with all its pressures and demands, yet the mind rests in an ease that is not granted by fortune, but discovered in seeing clearly how clinging shapes experience. Work, family, politics, and society remain as they are, messy and unpredictable, yet they no longer dictate inner states. This is liberation in practice. A mind free to act wisely and respond skillfully rather than reactively in any circumstance. Even in the chaos of global events, when conflict, injustice, or disaster appears unavoidable, the mind that has seen the nature of ego is not consumed by anxiety or resentment. The suffering of others is witnessed without turning into possessive fear or judgment. You can watch headlines about calamity, hear stories of betrayal or violence, or observe injustice in the world, and the mind can remain steady because the impulse to defend identity, to control perception, or to claim victory has loosened. Peace is not dependent on the absence of disorder. It arises from understanding the mechanism of clinging and the freedom that emerges when it is released. True liberation is not an escape from life, but the full engagement with it, without the constant shadow of ego. Life's difficulties no longer land as personal affronts because the ego no longer interprets them as threats. Happiness is no longer fragile, nor is sorrow intolerable. Freedom manifests as presence, as clarity, as the capacity to act with compassion and discernment in any situation. The mind rests in its own steadiness, and the usual turbulence of attachment, desire, and defense falls away, revealing a depth of freedom that is already inherent in every moment. When ego ends, suffering has nowhere to reside. Conflict loses its grip, judgment softens, and attachment loosens. The mind experiences its natural clarity, a lucidity that allows engagement without being drawn into every wave of circumstance. Daily life, in all its unpredictability, becomes a field of observation and presence rather than a battlefield of self-preservation. In this state, liberation is not a distant goal or a reward for merit. It is the unfolding of clarity, compassion, and peace in the very act of seeing reality as it is, moment by moment. Peace, once elusive, is found not in achievement, recognition, or control, but in the simple absence of insistence on I and mine. In that absence, the mind is free to witness, to respond, to love, and to endure, without the chains of selfhood distorting perception or limiting action. The world remains complex, messy, and unpredictable, yet the heart moves through it without grasping, without resistance, without defensiveness. Freedom is not granted by circumstance. It is discovered in the very act of seeing clearly, moment by moment, the nature of experience itself. If this wisdom resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to join us on the path of conscious living.